do you guys normally wait before cashing out equity on a property for your next purchase? What do you do, Joe, normally?
Well, generally, I just do it whenever I need to buy another property. So ideally ASAP. As soon as you do a renovation, like if you're doing a renovation or a value add and you know that the property price has gone above an amount that you can leverage and pull money out of it, do it straight away. If you need it, do it. That's my view on it. Jef, you're an ex-broker, right? You would have dealt with this situation. Is there a time that you have to wait, or how does it kind of work?
Well, usually you're probably going to need to wait at least, I'd say generally 3 months, because particularly if you've done a reno, because they may not necessarily value that straight away. As in, you may not. I mean, you sometimes can, but look, you can go and get a valuation sort of as soon as you've done the reno, but there's no guarantee that the bank will take that into consideration. Obviously, speak to your accountant and broker and all those sort of good people. But my thoughts is that you should, if a bank is offering you money, as long as it all comes down to your tolerance level as well. Because if you're not comfortable, then you probably shouldn't necessarily take it. So you shouldn't be leveraging that makes you sort of keeps you awake at night for a start. But the hardest time to get money is when you actually want it. So if you can actually get to a stage where you've got cash there, sit in your offset and do all that sort of good stuff. But access it whenever because then that way, when there is an opportunity come up, because you'll find a property tomorrow and you're like, crap, now I have to go and try and organize the money to be able to buy that property. Whereas if you've got it in the offset, you can just buy the thing if you want. If you make an offer, if you want.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers the question, but I hope it does. So
yeah, and this person, someone popped in here. 3 months if you bought well would be a minimum. Most of the time, 6 months, given enough time to get a decent comparable sales flow through for the valuation. Because the challenge is, if you haven't added any value to the property, the market has already determined what the price of that property is, and they're going to say it's at 500,000. No, I bought it under market value, $50,000 less. They're like, but you bought it and you're the market, so the market paid $500,000, not $550,000. So you're going to have to wait for those cycles to come through.
Start with your budget and then the location. So what the heck do I mean by this? Because people probably, I did even one last night because somebody's like, oh, I want to, which location should I buy? What location should I buy? And they did have a budget, so they'd done a little bit of research, but some people I even see some people say, oh, I want to go and buy in, I don't know, they want to go and buy in Bondi, they want to go and buy in Byron Bay, or this, and then the first question is, well, what is your budget? And then the budget comes out, it's like 600,000 or 700,000. And it's like, okay, if you're buying in Bondi for 600,000 or Byron, I mean, I don't know, you could probably buy a couple of eggs at that price of Byron, because it's just absolutely escalated. But I suppose my point is, people try and sort of fit where they want to buy into their budget, rather than fitting their budget into where they should be looking to buy. And then people sort of get so married to a location, and they sort of say, oh, look, even somewhere like maybe Penrith, if somebody had a 400K budget, you could buy in Penrith for $400,000. And I speak about that market because I know it somewhat well. And I know there's a lot of sort of off the plan units that have been constructed, which you could pick up for probably 400, 450, 500. But the problem is that the optimum use of your money? I would say probably not. And and that's why my playbook is to figure out, well, what is my budget first? Before I don't even bother looking at, okay, am I going to buy? And of course, once I've determined what my budget is, if I know my budget's 600,000, then I start to consider where I can sort of pick where's likely to perform sort of over the next sort of 3 to 5 to X amount of years. So that's my sort of playbook. And
I think that's super, super important, because at the end of the day, we're just capital allocators. As property investors, we are trying to identify the capital that we have on hand, and how can we allocate it to the best place that's going to get us the best return for our risk tolerance, how much money we have, and what type of outcome we want. So yeah, I completely agree. I see a lot of people, and this is how you get so frustrated as well, is, you know, you live locally, you live in Penrith, for instance, and you're like, oh, this place is amazing. I know it so well. I know this market incredibly well. $500,000, $400,000. You're not best served to buy a property, a dud asset, like a not great property that you can't add value to, that you can't add anything to at that price. So yeah, I think if you start with your budget in mind, you can then actually narrow down. So there's 15,000 suburbs in Australia. If you have a budget and you went to your mortgage broker, I mean, step one, go to your mortgage broker, have a chat with them. What can I borrow? How much can I afford? You will automatically cut down, like you'll get, I mean, it's still a lot, 2,000 or 3,000 suburbs. If you can say, I want to buy between 400 to 500. I don't know about those numbers, but you would definitely cut it down a lot further than you would imagine. Talking about rules, like you have to have some rules in your property investing when you're going ahead and selecting properties to buy. So a number of my rules are no bushfire, no flood, no easements, no encumbrances on the title, and no covenants. That's just the blanket rule. Now, there is flexibility on the easement side of things, because if there's an easement on the back of the block, it can still be split in certain parts of, depending on where it is and what it's all looking like. Speak to your town planner and developer and all of that stuff. But what I'm saying is, I'm going to use South Australia because it's an easier example. You can buy a property at 590 square meters for $500,000. If you bought a property for 601 square meters or 600 square meters, you'll probably pay 550. So there's a massive difference between those extra couple of meters, because you can actually add value to that property by subdividing it and splitting it down the middle, as long as you've got the right frontages and all of that stuff. Not financial advice, yada yada. But if you can, like, the land value is very important. Land is what's growing. But if you can then tie that in with a good zoning location, then you're good to go.
Last year, you guys thought Rockingham in Perth was a good investment area. Just curious if you still think so. Can we quantify that though, and just say, did you think it was a good investment area? I mean, we profiled it, but I want to make sure that we're both on the same page, Joe.
Look, I think if you did, if you did buy in it, you would have done pretty well in when we did it. So I'd say we were kind of saying it is a half decent market to be buying. I didn't think we were pushing it really hard, but we just did a data deep dive, didn't we? Was that what we did?
Yeah, we did. Because we wanted to go west, because we sent you over to WA. We need to send you somewhere else soon. I think we might even have to send. Yeah, we have to send you on a plane somewhere.
No, I'm going to WA in 2 weeks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez,
we actually, I think the next
really are jet setting. It's impressive.
But what are your thoughts on Rockingham, mate?
I tried to find an area a little bit, because you chose right in sort of down. I think you chose down Secret Harbour. Like, you chose right in Rockingham. Well, you chose right on the marina, whereas I went a bit inland and looked at Coolangup. And Coolangup, I thought was an interesting area. I probably would have been very cautious in Coolangup. I mean, I've not visited the area, so that would be my number one property play before I even considered that area. I think, yes, you've probably done well in that area. I think you have to be a bit cautious, because it's seen a lot of growth. So is it still affordable for that market? And what are the fundamentals say for the next 3 to 5? Like, back when we looked at it, it was still quite cheap. It was still, I think it was sort of mid-freeze, wasn't it? Low mid-freeze. This was almost, So it was pretty affordable for that area. And I think I don't know what the meaning of Rockingham is now, but I think it's gone up quite a bit to sort of low fours maybe.
Yeah, it's definitely grown. It's definitely grown a lot. So yeah, I think there are pockets within Rockingham that are well worth investment. There's a lot of infrastructure going in, like we said back on that session. There are definite pockets you don't want to be buying in within Rockingham. Like, I'm talking about because there's Rockingham suburb, and then there's the Rockingham LGA. So the LGA is what I'm talking about here. Rockingham, the suburb, has probably had the most out of all of the suburbs that I've ever bought in. it has had the most amount of investor activity that I've ever seen. I haven't seen anybody. Every investor that I know is like, what about Rockingham? What about Rockingham? So what I am starting to see is it's becoming a little bit more challenging to get. It's a little bit challenging to get tenants on some properties. Now, none of the properties that I like, we haven't bought in the Rockingham LGA for 6 months or something like that, but other pockets around. But anyway, just be wary that don't expect an amazing piece of rental growth. You've got to look at the affordability of a suburb, and this is like some of the fundamentals that you have to look at. How much can people in Rockingham actually afford in rent? Okay, here we go. You've brought it up here. But how much can people actually afford to pay in rent? Because although supply and demand comes into play, it also gets to a ceiling. Like there's a ceiling.
The yield's starting to come down as well. So you sort of start to say it's below 5% now.
That means the prices are growing though.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, units. Yeah, be very cautious. Even though it yields 6% for a unit, it depends on. Yeah, I mean, depends on going back to your reason for purchasing. But yeah, I'd be a little circumspect in terms of Rockingham now. Not to throw shade on the area, because there's value in a lot of areas. But yeah, just be.
I'm just talking Rockingham suburb, Rockingham LGA. I still see a lot of interest.
Yep. Not about the number of properties. It's about the LVR, net worth, net cash flow. So this is because What do you think? Do you want to steal this?
Well, no. I mean, I want 10 properties in 10 years. Like that's the main goal that I want.
But
isn't
Joe,
that the best?
You don't need 10 years to get 10 properties though. You could, if you had enough, you could easily just go and buy 10 properties for $100K each, and then you'd even become a millionaire. But so then you'd have the value of those 10 properties would be $1 million, and what would the rental return on that be as well? I suppose. Let's assume you've got a gross yield of 7%. So yes, you might be getting 70K gross income on that. We're playing through a bit of an example here, and then but the assumption is then like have you got debt on that property? So is it at 80%? So if the LVR is at 80%, then let's just say they're at 5% loan. That's probably round figures. So 8 times 5, so that's 45K in interest alone you're paying on that rent of. So straight away you're already losing more than half of that too. And yes, you can pay it down over time. So I'm not saying that you can't. But then the other thing I would say is you're then relying, if you're buying $100,000 properties, they might grow 20, 30% or whatever it is in, 5 years, 6, 7 years. That's $20,000, and yes, you still made money. But how do you then keep buying the next property? So you got to keep coming up with a deposit to buy that property. So
yeah, and also there have been massive storms in Victoria, and I just saw a post about someone who had their entire bloody half a roof collapsed. Exact same thing just happened to me. If you've got 10 older, rougher properties, I would not want to be running those. Also expect larger vacancies. They'd be in less desirable areas. But to be honest, based on, Australian property has grown. It's different numbers for different things, but what I recently saw on CoreLogic was at 5.9% Australia-wide nationally. So that is
was that 2020, 2022, was it?
I don't even think it did actually include 2022. So it would be even more. Yeah, you're correct. But you can actually achieve your goals if you structure your property portfolio. And this is why property planning is such an important process, because it allows you to look into the future and you realize that you can actually achieve what you want with 3 to 5 properties. You don't actually need these massive portfolios like people talk about. Exactly what you've got here. It's about the LVR, the loan to value ratio. How much of these properties do you own? What is your net worth? And most importantly, I want to retire. I want to make my salary, right? So I want my net worth in cash flow. And that's it. So
essentially what my playbook here is it's about your exit strategy. So, because I think a lot of people discount when they just buy. And don't get me wrong, like of course you have to take action. You can't just sort of play it out on paper, because if you only play it on paper and don't take action, then you won't ever get any result. But I think a lot of people don't sort of appreciate what they're actually aiming to do. And then they say, they just throw a number out there. They say 100K kind of passive income, but they don't also realize that on that 100K, you're going to have expenses of maybe, if you've got management fees, you've got insurance. So you might be lucky to make sort of 65 or 70K of that 100. So you will have expenses on that 100K. So I think the exit strategy is important. It doesn't mean you need to sell the property. People think when you say exit strategy, it's like, oh, I have to sell. Like that is one potential option. You can sell some, or you could even, the exit strategy for me is how you actually being able to retire or stop working or whatever it is. That to me is what I like to think is an exit strategy, but there's multiple types of exit
strategies. Boots on the ground. So this is another fundamental rule, and like it's funny. Like I see people that jump into courses and they're like, didn't even fly to the location, didn't get on a plane, used other people to, property managers to do it for you, and I'm like, oh yeah, sure, okay. I think if you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, just book a flight. No matter where you go to Australia, it's under $1,000. So you should go and fly to that location, or have somebody else fly to that location that you trust, and that well. So why is it so important? The most important thing, to be fair, is the data, the research that gets you to that point. It gets you to that location. The location is going to lift 80% of that asset. There's a particular area. There's a particular suburb that I'm thinking of. They literally have a pocket where it is a cutout. Like they've cut it out of the town, and it is just terrible. Do not buy there. Never buy in those pockets of the suburb. But you see $100,000 price difference.
Can you share the state that it's in, Joe?
Sorry? Yeah, it's in Victoria.
Yeah.
In Victoria. But yeah, it could be anywhere. Like a lot of suburbs have their no-go zones split up. Some have them all, concentrated on one pocket. Is all completely different. And also, it depends on your strategy, right? Like if your strategy is like the whole, trying to gentrify up, and get into properties. Yeah, if you're trying to go to locations that are not yet gentrified, like that can be a strategy where you can make a lot of money in like a poorer suburb, but it's moving up in the world. So again, your strategy. But that last 20% is what boots on the ground is. That last 20%, you don't want this 80, like it's 80-20, right? 20% of the work is done. Whatever the 80-20 rule is and how to explain it. But you need to fly to the location and make sure that you're buying in a hot spot and not a not spot. Because buying in those not spots will give you that stigma. And one of the questions right at the beginning was like that post you were talking about, Jef, like don't buy in bad places because they still grow, but they generally grow at the same kind of rate. So there will always be a gap between the good places and the bad places. So if you find an amazing, incredible suburb, you can still buy in it, but it's not necessarily going to be the best outcome for you. So one of the things, so I've got a whole list of things when it comes to visiting the location in person. So boots on the ground is exactly this. It allows you to, it is you getting on a plane, renting a car and driving around the suburb, meeting the locals, talking to the real estate agents and connecting with people to try and find the best properties, get the best insights and things in the future as well. A lot of things you actually see are like what infrastructure projects are going in. Is there a new Coles? Is there a new Woolies? This stuff doesn't really show up online too much. You don't hear too much about it, but then you see a new building getting put up. Okay, great. There's going to be something there.